So, hi, I'm Maria, and I'm going to talk about an experiment I did earlier this year. And, well, there is my Mastodon account, but you can find me also on Twitter at Delawen, but I'm no longer using Twitter, so I'm not going to answer anything. But on Mastodon, I will answer things. Who am I? Well, I have had a long career already doing different stuff, but on the latest years, I have focused a lot on Java. I'm now on the OpenJDK team in Red Hat, which means I joined earlier this year in January, and I have been doing small stuff in OpenJDK, like backports and that kind of things. And I'm very interested in Java, obviously. So let's start with what this talk is about. I guess most of you are Java developers, if you are here. If not, it doesn't matter. You will understand this talk anyway. And when you start a new project in Java, usually you don't only use plain vanilla Java. You add some frameworks and libraries to help you, I don't know, connect to databases, create services, model things. The thing is that usually this is something that happens in all languages. This is not exclusively of Java. And this is something that also enriches the language, because you not only have the basic language, but you add extra stuff that helps you build good applications. You don't have to maintain those libraries and frameworks to use them, but you get all the features and all the advantages that they provide. And this is good. This is fine. This is good. But sometimes this does not evolve in the way it should be, or we would like to evolve. Like, for example, this is very clear in the JavaScript environment. In the JavaScript environment, if you look at what has happened in the last 20, 30 years, like 20 years ago, everybody was using jQuery, which was a library in JavaScript that did everything that plain JavaScript didn't do, like Ajax asynchronous calls and this kind of stuff that, or create components on the web pages that were fancier than plain HTML components. And the thing is that it was so good that in the end it became a de facto standard. Everybody was using it, or most of the people were using it. And the developers of the JavaScript language decided that, well, it makes sense. If everybody's using it, we have experimented with it, the language is evolving with it, it makes sense to take those features, or most of those features, or the most used features of that library, and add them to the basic JavaScript vanilla language. And right now, you can do things with plain JavaScript that you couldn't do 20 years ago. That's something that happens with all languages, and this is good. Because instead of evolving directly the language, you experiment first on libraries and frameworks. The things that work and work well and people like, you incorporate to the basic language. The things that don't work or don't work that well, or maybe they should be re-implemented in another way, because after building thousands of web applications, they discovered that that was not the right way of implementing something, then you have kind of a buffer to decide how to implement that in the basic language. And this is good. But if you look at what is happening in the JavaScript environment right now, and I'm going to stop talking about JavaScript very soon, but the thing is, right now, you no longer see job offers that says, I'm looking for a JavaScript developer. You see job offers that says, I'm looking for a React developer, a Vue developer, an AngularJS developer. Because now there is not a de facto standard. There are many frameworks that are doing exactly the same thing in very similar ways, but you cannot really translate the code that is written in one framework to another. Or you cannot really, a developer that is specialized in React, when they have to move to Angular, or vice versa, they have to relearn everything because the way of doing things is different. The concepts may be the same. You have components, you have extensions, you have shadow DOM, but the way of doing things is completely different. So if you need to move to a different framework or library, you have to mostly remove 80, 90% of the code and start from scratch. And this is not good for two things. First, they are fragmenting the ecosystem, and that means that you have kind of different ecosystems with different developers that are evolving in a different way and doing different stuff and reinventing the wheel again and again. And at the same time now, the JavaScript vanilla, it is not clear where it should evolve. Because should it follow the way of doing things of Angular, Vue, Svelte, React? It's not clear, so that's not nice. And this is something that hasn't happened yet in Java ecosystem. We have had like jQuery, we have had Spring since forever, since the early 2000s, sorry. And Spring became kind of a de facto standard, but it hasn't been as clear as jQuery, and there's many other libraries and frameworks that are also in the Java ecosystem. And each of those frameworks started to do things in a different way, started to implement their own annotations, their own ways of working, their own ways of not only implementing the features, but also how to define the features, how to describe the concepts and the way of implementing things. And what I want to talk about today is Microprofile, which is a community-driven effort, vendor neutral. Of course, there are companies behind it, but the idea is there is not one single company pushing it. It's like a lot of developers. Some are from companies, some are from not companies or not big companies. And the idea is to define some APIs, some standards, some concepts, some abstractions that could be applied to all the frameworks, all the libraries. So we kind of, everybody evolves in the same way, in the same direction. So each framework and library implement their own thing. And they implement however they think is best for the use case. But the idea is that we can all speak the same language, not like a React and Angular developer that have some problems communicating, but that we have all the same understandings and the same common language, some common ground we can all play in. And I know some of you may think, OK, I was here yesterday, and I was hearing about Jakarta. There were 2 talks, one improvised, about Jakarta. Is this not the same thing? So you're describing some APIs that are common and some APIs that are kind of generic, that frameworks can implement. And this is the same thing. Why do you want to talk about Microprofile? Well, yes, it's the same thing. And in fact, Microprofile contains Jakarta, but it's bigger than that. I mean, Jakarta is a big part of what Microprofile is, but it's not the only thing that is there. For example, you also have telemetry APIs for observability. So this, when you add some observability framework or library, until a few years ago, well, observability has not been big since, I don't know, a few years ago. But at the beginning, every time you try to change to another library or framework that did observability the same way, but it was different, it was a different library or framework, a different vendor, you needed to adapt your source code to the new annotations, framework, configuration, whatever. Now there is kind of a generic telemetry API, and as long as you use a vendor that uses that telemetry, your code should be the same, just changing some configuration and dependencies. Same with OpenAPI, config, try to load config properties from file properties from the system. Health also for the cloud, making sure the application is running properly. So this kind of APIs are generic. This is not implementation. This is generic APIs like Jakarta. The good thing is that all the things that were explained yesterday, I don't need to re-explain them today again. So we will be able to go for lunch earlier. So that's good. And this is what I want to talk about today. And is this really real? I mean, we have different APIs that are generic, and we have different frameworks and libraries that claim to implement those APIs. Do they really implement them? I mean, if I use the same source code in different frameworks, will it work? So that was something that I haven't seen anyone done yet much. So at the beginning of this year, I decided to run an experiment, take a couple of frameworks, play some basic source code that is written in microprofile language, and see if it runs. If it runs, it means that we are going in the right direction. And if it doesn't run, then it means something is wrong. Maybe it's me, that I'm not able to develop it, or maybe it's that this initiative is not really working. So let's see. Which frameworks did I choose? There are some frameworks that were like Open Liberty, that was shown yesterday, that are very microprofile driven, which is good. But I decided to use the three that I thought were most popular, because not because I think this is the ones that should be used, but I think this is the ones that people could feel more close to if they are running this experiment like I did. And the first disclaimer I want to say is that I am not a Quarkus developer. I work for Red Hat. I am not on the Quarkus team. I have done some Quarkus application, but just one application, and I am not a person that reads much the documentation, so there may be things I'm not doing right. I have worked with Spring, but I stopped like 5, 6 years ago, so I wouldn't say I'm a Spring expert either. And Micronaut, this was the first time I tried something in Micronaut. So this is like a civilian approach to, I don't know anything. I know microprofile. I know what it is. I want to use it. Let's see if this works. So maybe I will show some code that is not really the best code to show or the best way to implement things. But also, if I'm doing things wrong, that means that the documentation is not as clear as it should be. Because I am a developer that has no experience in that framework. I start using that framework, and I can't find the answers on how to properly do things on that framework. So it's partly my fault if I do something wrong, but it's also partly wrong on the documentation. Why did I choose Spring Boot? Well, because it is the standard in the industry. It has been the standard for years. It has been, everybody knows what Spring is. It has very good documentation, a lot of examples, use cases. Stack Overflow is full of Spring. There's a lot of experts. I can ask people around when I don't know how to do things. And the downside of this is that microprofiles arrive late to the Spring party. This means Spring already had a lot of standards, a lot of definitions, a lot of annotations, a lot of concepts, a lot of decisions made before microprofile even existed or even was an idea somewhere. So that means that Spring had to adapt to microprofile. And that means, as we will see later, that some of the concepts of microprofile do not 100% translate exactly in the way we want to use them. And this is not Spring's fault. This is not something bad. This is just what it is, that it will take time to be able to translate everything. But as it was shown yesterday, there are several automatic translation tools to Jakarta, and that can be used to try to help in this transition. The second framework I used was Micronaut. Why? Because, well, it has a close relationship with GraalVM and Oracle. And as you should know, Oracle is the company that owns the Java trademark, that is the biggest player in the Java development. And it has been, for a few years already, in the market. People are already using it for production. It has a strong focus, as all the libraries and frameworks that are very recent, on cloud native, microservices, Kubernetes, etc. And I would say Microprofile is an important guest at Micronaut party. What does this mean? Well, they started around the same time. Microprofile is a couple of years older. And Micronaut has taken Microprofile very seriously. But it's not 100% purist, which means if Micronaut wants to do something that Microprofile does not support yet, they have no shame, no problem in creating their own extensions that implement whatever is missing, which is good. Is it a bug or a feature? Is it good? Yes, it's good, because it means they are providing extra stuff. But also that means that part of the code that you generate in Micronaut is not Microprofile compliant, because it's their own stuff. Similar to what happens in Spring. Spring has a lot of things that are outside Microprofile. And then Quarkus. Quarkus, like Micronaut, is very focused on GraalVM or the Mandrel version for Red Hat Quarkus. It has been more or less, it's kind of similar age as Micronaut, also for the cloud, for Kubernetes, etc. And on this case, Microprofile is the main actor on the Quarkus party, which means if something cannot be implemented in Microprofile, usually the Quarkus developers push Microprofile to support whatever is missing before they add extra stuff. Which is nice, because that means it's more purist in the sense that the code generated is more Microprofile. But also it means that maybe it's lacking some features that are like extra extensions, optional things for things that are not main core important stuff, but you know, some optimizations, whatever. I want to say that this class has some extra specific cherry on top stuff. So these are the three frameworks we are going to talk about today. And I mentioned GraalVM, and I want to mention it a bit more. Why? GraalVM, for those of you who doesn't know, well, it's the focus of the three frameworks, less on Spring, well, more on Spring on the latest few months, but as you know, this is a late addition to Spring, so it's not part of the core basis of Spring. But what GraalVM is a different development kit virtual machine for Java, which focuses on trying to speed up the startup, try to make it more faster, use less memory. It has a specific compilation for native mode, which means you can build an executable that runs without a virtual machine. And how does it, GraalVM, how does it do the less memory, faster startup, and faster running in Java? Because you know, Java has this bad fame, which is not true anymore, but this has this bad fame of using a lot of memory, being so slow. For serverless is not good because it takes so long to start. I don't know if you have seen one of the Quarkus presentations, but one of the presentations from Holly, she compared starting a Quarkus application with turning the light on. And Quarkus was faster than the time the bulb started to was on. So Java is no longer slow. But you know, how does GraalVM does this? How does Quarkus Micronaut does this? They work on the closed world assumption, which means at build time, I have all the information I will have at runtime. So at runtime, I'm not going to add any extra classes. I'm not going to add anything new. I'm not going to use reflection to call some class dynamically. And that means that on build time, you can check if a class is not used by anyone, then we can just remove it. If a method is not used by anyone, just remove it. If there is some branch in some if-else that I already know is not going to happen because maybe it's checking some variable configuration, and I already know on build time what the configuration is going to be, just remove it. So it removes a lot of things. And it doesn't add all the basic Java. It also adds the classes that are going to be used. So this is something interesting. And the problem is that this closed world assumption is not true for everyone, because you assume that you have on build time all the information you need. That doesn't happen always. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, but not on a closed world assumption, there is the Latent project in the Java vanilla core OpenJDK ecosystem that is trying to do something similar. Just cut things, improve memory, do things faster, but without this closed world assumption. So it's not as effective because you lack a lot of information, but it's another attempt at making Java faster and use less memory. So these three frameworks are not only interesting because they use microprofile, but also because they focus a lot on GraalVM. So let's get dirty. OK. The experiment is I'm going to write some basic source code in microprofile language. Will it run in the three frameworks just by changing the dependencies? And is this a good idea? Because when I started this experiment, I had no idea what was going to happen. Maybe it didn't make sense. But to me, it makes sense. So the first thing I had to check is I decided to use Maven, because that's what I know. And I thought, well, I just want to have some source code and some dependencies that change. That's profile. I'm going to have a Quarkus profile, a Spring profile, a Micronaut profile. Changing the dependencies, the source code is the same. Run it. It should work. Can I do this? Well, yes and no. I have here the source code. And, well, there's some, this shouldn't be, oh, well, I can leave it here. Some stupid properties at the beginning. So I start with, for example, Quarkus. Quarkus, can I, for example, because the dependencies, if I add some hibernate or something, I need some kind of bomb managed dependency for each framework, because each of them will have different version numbers. Can I add dependency management for each framework that is different inside my profile? For Quarkus, we have the POM import dependency management that will handle everything. Perfect. It's very clean. When I move to Micronaut, Micronaut didn't allow me. Maybe there is a way of doing this. I couldn't find it. Didn't allow me to add a dependency management, which means Micronaut is forcing me to add a parent on my POM. I have to add a parent, which I never like, not only because this breaks my experiment a bit, but also because what happens if I'm on a big architecture of projects, dependencies, blah, 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 and I have my own parent that comes from my company that has whatever, whatever. Micronaut is forcing me to use their own parent. I don't like that. And Spring also suggests very strongly that I use the Spring Boot parent. But if I don't want to do it, well, there is some Spring dependencies management here that I can use. So some libraries will not have the version properly set up because I'm not using the parent, but most of them will be fine with this. So the first thing is that can I really separate the dependency management and keep it clean, so when I change from one framework to another, is it going to be clean? Well, yes for Quarkus. Spring Boot, mostly yes. But Micronaut, I'm sorry, I couldn't find a way of doing this cleanly. It needs the parent, and it's very annoying when I start coding it. Once people ask me why I use cat photos, and they didn't make sense. And I tell, no, this is what is telling me what I need to talk about. This is cats invoking a service. This makes sense for me, but people sometimes get very confused. So I'm going to try invoking, creating a REST service, very simple, hello world. And I'm going to see if it works. So the first thing is, you can see that there is a simple hello world REST API in Microprofile. It's very clean. It's very easy to understand what is the path where the service is going to be. I'm going to offer a get service that produces text plain that is hello from Microprofile. And all the imports are Jakarta, which is part of Microprofile. Perfect. And that's it. This is generic. This is understandable for everyone. This doesn't have any specific imports from anyone. So I have it here, the hello service. I can remove this. This, I try to add more complex stuff, but that's it. Hello service. Will it work? It should work. So for doing a REST API service, I have to add the dependencies, of course. On Quarkus, the dependencies are very simple because, well, I add some CDA, and I say REST easy reactive. The newer version of Quarkus, you remove the REST easy, it's just Quarkus reactive, but, well, I did this a couple of months ago, and I haven't updated the Quarkus version, but it's fine. With these two dependencies, in fact, right now, I don't even need the Jackson yet. The Jackson is for later. So just I add the dependency for, I'm going to add a reactive REST. I added the dependency management. I add the hello service class. And I add a build plugin for Quarkus. This is the specific plugin that starts doing this thing that I told you about, removing stuff that was not going to be used and this kind of thing. So if I do here a deployment, it's not going to, of course, because I have the database resource and the persistent service, but I don't have the delete anyway. I don't have the dependencies, right? That was your issue. And the model, of course, for the database. Yes. So on localhost 8080 in the path hello, hello for Microprofile, and it works. I can use Microprofile code. If I stop Quarkus, I can go now to Spring, and I say, OK, what do I need to add to Spring? Well, I need to add some REST CXRF, is the one I used. Dependency, the build plugin. And the problem with Spring, and this is the first thing that I found that was not Microprofile, is that it needs an application class, which for those using Spring, you say, obviously. I say, why? Because it needs a specific Spring application class that the only thing this class does is say, run the application class. Seriously? I mean, for Spring developers, this makes sense. For me, this is just trash. I don't need it. This is obvious. Why? If I don't have this, it won't work. But if I add this specific thing, it will work. So I run it. I have to remove the H2 database too, because I still don't need it, and it doesn't have the dependency. I'm not used to this keyboard. OK. No, because I'm not using the profile Spring. Yes, I forgot to add the profile Spring. And if I go to localhost 8080, here, it says, hello from Microprofile. So Spring also can work with Microprofile, but I need this extra class. OK. And same thing happens with Micronaut. Micronaut, I need to add this extra class. I can do that. Why are you? I don't have the proper shortcuts here. OK. And no, hello service. No, this is not what I was going to remove. I was going to remove this cert import. So with Micronaut, it happens the same thing in Spring. I need this class that for me is redundant. And if I run it, oh, complaining about dependencies. Why? Because I forgot the parent. And what I need to add on the POM file is more complex than in Quarkus and Spring. Why? Because I added the dependencies for the service. This is perfectly fine. But then on the build part, I have to add a lot of things and this annotation process path. And I don't know if there is a better way of doing this, but if you want to use Micronaut, Microprofile inside Micronaut, you need to explicitly tell him to use the inject Java, inject data processor, because it's like, it's not by default. To me, this is weird. Once you configure it, you can forget about it. But it adds a lot of stuff on the POM file that, to me, it doesn't make sense. And this is running. And if I do this, it works. So in theory, it works. Microprofile is supported by the 3. But the truth is that in Quarkus, it's more clean, because you just add the dependency of I have a REST API. I want to run it. In Spring Boot, you have to add this extra class that is kind of weird. And then in Micronaut, the same. And then also all the extra stuff in the POM file about, hey, make sure you check about the annotations in Microprofile, as if it shouldn't be by default. So if there's someone from Micronaut here and they say they want to stop me and say, hey, you're doing it wrong, I'm perfectly fine with that. It's just it was not in the documentation. If there is a better way, I have no idea where to find it. I'm going to add some database right now. And to add the database, I'm going to add an H2 in memory database. And I can remove it. Dependency. And to add the database, this is also very similar on the 3 of. In Quarkus, it's very clean, because you just say, OK, hibernate, validator, JDBC, H2 driver, which is the basics. Makes sense. It's not like I'm biased for Quarkus. It's like I find it easier. In Micronaut, once you have all the previous stuff, you just have to add, yes, hibernate, that's fine. Hikari, JDBC dependency, I don't know why I need to add this explicitly, but OK. Some Jakarta validation API, I have to add it explicitly because it was not explicitly there. And the rest is the same. So once you configure this long, it's fine. And for Spring Boot, it's also very clean because it's, again, JPA, validation. Jakarta inject API, OK, I have to do it manually. Maybe it's because I'm not using the POM or something, whatever. Sorry, the parent or something, so I have to add it manually. And dependency-wise, the three of them are very good once I just add the persistent stuff. I'm going to restore the files that I remove. Model. OK, check out main Java.com example model cat. But they have to write specifically, OK, persistent service and database. OK. So I have a model entity. Yes, that's the next thing. So I can define a database entity with columns, many-to-many, and one-to-one, IDs, sequence, and all this kind of stuff using Jakarta. And the three frameworks should understand it. And it's very simple. I'm just using a table named cat. They have a name. They have an ID. The ID is automatically generated. Forget about it. And then I have a database resource. And here we are going to see the first problem, which is fine. So I'm going to use something very basic or base level, like a persistent context and entity manager that is Jakarta, is generic. Add some transactional, because whatever persist a cat, get the list of all the persisted cats. And then I'm going to have a service that is going to inject this database resource and use it to add cats. I'm going to use the get, not because the get should add things, but because it's easier to show here. And then I get all cats. So it's pretty simple. It's very easy to understand and read. It uses only Jakarta imports. It's not, so it's microprofile. And it's not, it should work in the three frameworks. I also have some application properties in which I have, for Spring and Quarkus, if you notice, the persistence annotations, the database annotations, start with Quarkus and Spring. And for Micronaut, they go directly to data sources, whatever. It doesn't say Micronaut dot whatever. Depending on how you think about this can be a bug or a feature. Some people prefer to have separated properties per framework, because maybe they are going to use different stuff. Some other people will say, no, it makes sense to make everything together, because that's what it is. In any case, most of them are the same. So you have the DBC H2 URL, the driver, password, blah, blah, blah. It's the same. So It should work. Let's see if I run it with Quarkus. Good thing I have the Wi-Fi of speakers. And what have I done wrongly? No value present. Singleton. Did I remove the singleton? No, it's here. Then what is missing? Oh, the parent is here, maybe giving problems. Should work. It was working yesterday. Okay, so it was the parent from Micronaut doing weird stuff. So if I do cat dbcat, I add a cat named Antonia, blah, blah, blah. I get the list of cats. I get the list of cats. So Quarkus understands microprofile with databases. Let's see Micronaut. I need to add the parent again. Right. Micronaut. Both for Quarkus and Micronaut, if you leave the Quarkus dev and mn run, I think it's called, and you change the source code, it recompiles in real time, so you don't have to start and stop. But as I'm changing frameworks, I prefer to stop. So this is empty because I haven't added anything yet. I add a cat. I check the cats. It works. And for Spring, this is what is going to be a problem, because for Spring, I told you that sometimes it doesn't translate 100% fine. This is one of this is one of the moments when it doesn't translate properly. The singleton annotation in Spring, for backwards compatibility, they have to keep it like it was before, and on this case, it doesn't work. Spring people can explain better why it doesn't work on this case, but the problem is it doesn't work, and I need a specific annotation named, which is not a singleton. It's not exactly what I want, but it works. So Spring. And we can keep adding things to this application and check if observability works, check if other more complex stuff works. And most of it will work. What happened? La dirección ya se está usando. Wait. Who is? It says that I already have something on 8080? No. No. OK. I can add a cat. Could not found base definition because. OK, it's failing. I'm not going to stop here because we have 5 minutes left. The thing is, what I said before about the properties, depending on if you want them mixed or starting with the name of the framework, it's a bug or a feature. And the source code in Micronaut and Quarkus works right. In Spring Boot, we start finding these small, nitpicky details that are not microprofile 100% compliant. And this is, again, this is not Spring being bad. This is just backwards compatibility, and it will become better on time. I'm pretty sure of that. So as a summary, are we microprofile compliant, yes or no? Well, I would say yes. Most of the code works. Sometimes you have to change or add stuff, specific stuff, but it's fine. And that was what I wanted to show you, that microprofile is a reality. Maybe you have old code that is not microprofile, and maybe you should start thinking on migrating it, because that's the future of all the frameworks, or it looks like it's the future of all the frameworks. And also, it means that if in the future you have to change to another framework or library, or you have to update something, it will be much easier, or hire new developers. It will be much easier if you're working all with microprofile than if you're using specific annotations on Spring or Micronaut or whatever other framework you're using. It makes sense to try to get everything into microprofile. And if something is not yet on microprofile that you would like to have, it's community project. Just contribute to it. And I don't know if there's any questions. Or you're hungry and just want to go for lunch. OK? I free you.